Rudy Giuliani would call a lynching mob. Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and a professor at the University of Alabama Law School. She's also an MSNBC contributor. And back with us is Jill Wine-Banks, former federal prosecutor. And Joyce Vance, I want to get your reaction to what Rudy Giuliani just said.
It's incredibly disturbing to hear him say that, Lawrence. You know, I live in Alabama, and not too many weeks ago, a memorial to victims of all lynchings that occurred during the civil rights movement opened down here. These were people who were killed without a trial, often people who had done nothing wrong. And for Rudy Giuliani to compare what Mueller's team of highly experienced, incredibly professional prosecutors and investigators from whom we haven't heard a single, peep of a leak in the entire run of this investigation, for him to compare those people to lynching mobs in the Deep South during Jim Crow and earlier eras is just without any reason deeply offensive.
And Jill, it used to be that the accepted tradition of special prosecutors is that they come from the opposing party of the president. You don't want a Democratic special prosecutor investigating a Democratic president. And so Bill Clinton had a Republican special prosecutor investigating him because that lends credibility to the final outcome of the investigation, that there's no partisan bias in favor of the president in this kind of investigation. It seems that Rudy Giuliani now believes, and everyone at Fox News now believes, that the only legitimate special prosecutor investigation of a Republican president can only be done by Republicans.
Well, of course, that isn't true, and Richard Nixon was a Republican president investigated by a Democrat. But Donald Trump is a Republican president being investigated by a Republican. Mueller is Republican. As far as the staff, I don't know their party affiliations, although it has been alleged that there are 13 Democrats. But I can say for sure that the professionals in the Department of Justice, the party affiliation has nothing to do with how they will investigate. It has to do with the facts. They will look at the facts and they will come to conclusions based on those facts. And I think I heard Rudy just say that he was a high official of the Department of Justice. I'm not aware of that. He was the U.S. attorney, but then Joyce is also a former U.S. attorney, and so she ranks equally with him, and I'm with her opinion on this. She is absolutely correct. I think he's taking too many lessons from Roseanne Barr and from Donald Trump in his language, and it's unforgivable for a lawyer representing the president to speak that way.
Rudy Giuliani did serve in the Justice Department in Washington before becoming the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Just want to get that in the notes here. I want to listen to more of what Rudy Giuliani said, especially his approach to what he says should have been the approach to the investigation of possible collusion. And of course, he uses the word spying, saying that the Trump campaign should have been notified about what the FBI was actually investigating. Let's listen to this.
Of course, if it wasn't spying, they should have come to the Trump campaign. They could have come to me. My goodness, I was the FBI Man of the Year that year. They could have come to me, and they could have told me, and I could have briefed the president, or they could have briefed the president.
Joyce, your reaction to that?
It's just wrong. For one thing, this would have been a highly classified investigation. No reason to believe that Rudy would have had the level of classification necessary for this information to be shared with him. And when you're conducting a counterintelligence investigation, you keep it as closely held as possible because your entire goal is to uncover what's happening and then to put a stop to it. You're really not looking for a criminal prosecution in that situation, although sometimes they morph, and this one apparently did. But the goal of the FBI would have been to put an end to Russian interference, to make sure that they weren't recruiting anyone. And as if that's not enough, they did warn the campaign. They told them early on that they would be the subject, very likely, of efforts by Russia, and it would have been on the campaign to pick up the phone and call the FBI when they started getting these hits from Russians. But at no point in time did they do that. Not when there was outreach through the NRA looking for a back channel, not when Russians set up a meeting at Trump Tower. At no point in time did they pick up the phone and call the FBI.
And Jill, the New York Times has a breaking news report tonight about a memo written by Andrew McCabe, the former director of the FBI. This is a memo that has not been publicly revealed before. And in that memo, Andrew McCabe summarizes conversations that he had with Rod Rosenstein about the firing of James Comey. And Rod Rosenstein, in that memo, tells Andrew McCabe that the president wanted Rod Rosenstein to include something about Russia in Rod Rosenstein's memo on justifying the firing of James Comey.
Well, it's now, according to that same news report, that the reason that he wanted something in there was just to have them say, I'm not under investigation for the Russian collusion. But the whole conversation was very inappropriate, and I think that the fact that McCabe wrote this memo is because he felt that there was something fishy going on and that it shouldn't have happened. It's another piece of evidence that there was intent on the president's part to interfere in the investigation. And I just want to add one thing to what Joy said, which is I think it's time for Rudy to zip up and stop talking, because he's just making things worse for the president. He is not helping him.
I don't think that's going to happen. Joyce Vance, Jill Wine-Banks, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.